Welcome to the Code Review Weekly. I am gonna find the agenda and change something really quick. Before we'll leave Matt's read only, and then we'll bump in. Sorry. And Matthew and Andy are here. I think Andy came last week and introduced himself, so we'll just make Matthew introduce himself this time around. So Matthew, if you want to say hi, I don't know, tell us about yourself, all those things.
Yeah, my name's Matthew. Either one works. I came from fulfillment utilization. I've been at GitLab just over 3 years. I live in California, just north of San Diego, and I have 4 kids. So life is crazy. But yeah, it's good to be here. Nice to meet everyone.
What's the age spread on the kids?
10, 8, 5, and 1.5.
So you haven't slept a full night in a decade?
Yeah, that's true.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the team. I feel like I'm obligated to ask, do you have a strong preference for Matthew or Matt? Because other Matt, I think, has a preference for Matt. And so I just need to know who we're referencing.
I don't have a strong preference.
Okay.
Whatever you're comfortable saying.
Yeah, the similar initials are also not helping.
There can be only one Matt N.
Yeah, who are you talking about, Matt N?
Yeah. Oh, the other Matt
I
N.
suggest I suggest a duel, and live streamed on Twitch. It could be it could be a game, it's fine. It could be Overwatch, it could be something nice. I'm kidding.
We should do another escape room, and they should have to work individually, and whoever gets the fastest time gets the Matt name. We'll go from there.
Yeah, I failed my last escape room, so that's a bad idea.
Okay, yes, I agree. I think we'll be able to figure it out. I think we'll be all right.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Matthew, and then Andy as well for hanging out. And then Ben, you've got the first work-related thing up on the agenda.
Yeah, so just to fill you guys in a little bit, context-wise, Sarah Waldner had tasked me with rewriting the jobs to be done for the create stage. And that sort of sparked off a chain of events that has now led to us rethinking and sort of realigning how we do this framework called jobs to be done across the whole company. Andy and I are part of an OKR that is heading this up. And luckily, you guys get to be the guinea pigs, since we were already sort of rewriting create stage jobs to be done. We're breaking it out into team sort of workshops. And don't worry, it'll be fun. Like, we've done most of the work for you. It's mostly like, are we getting it right to the best of your knowledge? And I'm happy to answer questions on it ahead of time if you like. I'm not sure when the invite is going to go out. We have to make sure our ducks are in a row first, but yeah. Andy, do you want to add anything there?
There's a very high rate of survival for the guinea pigs in this study, so do not worry.
The limbs grow back, right?
I noticed you didn't say it's 100%. You just said it's very high.
I mean, over half. That's
Oof. That's worse than I expected.
a majority.
Yeah. I guess the general thinking too is that we get from it what we need, and we're showing other groups how that's done, as opposed to kind of going through a new process and kind of seeing if that fits and then iterating on top of that. It's going to be more of like kind of by the book, fit into our GitLab processes. So that's the GitLab way. And then we just kind of share that out to the rest of the org. So.
Yeah, so we have like on the order of 250 job stories, or what we call like jobs to be done across the company, and that's like way too many. So we're sort of realigning them to job performers, as opposed to every nook and cranny of GitLab needs to have its own job stories. So that should hopefully breed alignment and clarity and all kinds of good stuff. Thomas, did you want to vocalize your? I don't know
Sure.
how.
Yeah. I mean, I can. You obviously answered it already. I just didn't know what the JTBD acronym stood for, jobs to be done. It might help me or anyone watching this video just to kind of briefly explain sort of the framework that you're referring to there, so we can sort of understand how you go about it.
Sure. And Andy, you can jump in here if you'd like. Basically, jobs to be done takes the philosophy that you should start, understanding your product from your job performer sort of point of view. So not like a persona, not what you guess or you think your existing customers already do with your product, but like for us, right? What is a code reviewer? Who is this person? What do they need to get done, right? What are their jobs? And so by sort of systematically breaking that out into different aspects. So what is their, sort of job map? What are their aspirational goals? What are their social goals? What are their emotional goals? You can come up with this sort of profile of a job performer that then you can highlight sort of like, what are the main outcomes that this job performer needs to do? And then you can prioritize those outcomes based on, so you can actually like survey your constituents and see like, okay, this job is, 9 out of 10 important to me. And right now it's only 3 out of 10 easy. So like there's an opportunity there to really like improve that outcome, right? And so you can sort of recycle that into driving product innovation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It works outside of solutions. So by understanding the generic tasks and those components that align to them, we can be more flexible and creative on how we solve those problems. So like one of the tasks might be, I go and look at, as a code reviewer, I go and look at the company's documentation on how to code review. Like that could be an opportunity to allow companies to like import that documentation in a quick view inside the MR, right? Among many opportunities in their workflow. So.
Cool. Does that sort of answer your question?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just knowing what the acronym stands for helps a lot. Jobs to be done, that clears up a lot. But yeah, the framework, definitely that's really useful to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Amy, I think you're the next point there.
Yeah, I was wondering if I was going to be of any use here.
I mean, I think you have a good amount of insight into code review in terms of what it encapsulates. Even if you're not a code reviewer yourself, you use MRs all the time. So, I mean, you're knowledgeable. So it's up to you. If you feel like you're impacted and you don't want to participate, that's okay. I'll let you off the hook because I know you're busy.
Let me in.
We'll invite you anyway, and you can make up your mind.
It's also a fun exercise in semantics, linguistics, ontology. So
now see, you're speaking my language there.
Yeah. Controlled vocabularies.
Yes. Taxonomy. Yes, I am great at parties. Thanks for asking.
Kai, do you want to?
Yeah. I know like some of the original genesis of this was like a create stage job to be done, which feels ambitious given the scope of the create stage at sometimes. And then you sort of mentioned like aligning it to job performers versus feature areas. Is that like a shift in sort of thinking in general about this, that like instead of trying to think about it for merge request or for create or for whatever, we're really thinking about like, what does this user want to accomplish like across GitLab, and like how does everyone's little piece relate to like sort of that job? Does that still like end as a compact like single sentence? Like that feels like these are going to get really long now versus sort of how they existed before.
It's a different thing, right? Instead of these little statements where you're trying to capture everything and we end up with hundreds of them, what you really end up with is a set of, we don't know yet, but like, let's say a dozen or so job performer kind of maps or canvases, right? And so it's not going to be these hundreds of statements that try to cover every use case. It's going to be, what are the main job performers for GitLab? And then you can, by divorcing that from solutions or from particular stage groups or areas, you should be able to say, these are the job performers that my stage or my group is concerned with, right? And that way we're all basing our decisions off of the same job performer profiles.
I think I've seen in one of the docs for this, these are tied to like our current personas that we define, right? Is that why we were trying to say
So
which stages personas belong in, or is this different from that too?
it's related, but
Okay.
fundamentally jobs to be done and personas are divorced from each other, because we don't care what your job title is in a job performer, right? So anybody who reviews code at any time, regardless of their job title, is sometimes takes on the role of code reviewer, right? Does that make sense? And so like a Sasha, right, persona, within the course of their day, they might be a code reviewer, they might be a code author, they might be a code repository maintainer, they might be like 5 different sort of job performer hats, right? But we, like, each group is really only responsible for, the ones that touch their area. Am I making sense? It's hard to make sense.
Yeah, I think that helped. They were both coming at the same time, so they seemed more related in just terms of like the work that's happening, but that sounds like they're not necessarily related. And I like the idea of thinking about code reviewers given our stage in particular as like divorced from like personas. I think that's always been a challenge of the merge request, is like we focus very heavily on that developer persona and not necessarily like all of the people who might be a code reviewer, like the AppSec people or the whatever other people that can interact with a merge request. And so that seems yeah, I don't know. It seems like we could get some interesting insights and really different ways to think about it, which can help us and I think other stages inside the merge request. So cool. Thanks for all the details.
So Ben, but there's still a space there to, as you're drafting the jobs to be done, cars and everything, to account for different personas. And so the task, so the job to be done, I as a code reviewer, I want to be able to see the responses to my previous comments on the review, or I want to be able to see comments on front end files, for example. So there's still space to account for different kind of types of users. It's just that we approach that from a generic perspective of the job to be done, not necessarily the title of the person, right?
That's right. Yeah, so there's a part
Therein
of,
lies the mastery in the science. Yeah.
yeah, there's a part of the canvas that we call differentiators. And so some of that will live there, right? So for instance, whether you're a new team member versus an experienced team member, right? That might bifurcate how that job gets done. Or yeah, if you're a front end reviewer versus a back end reviewer, or right, any number of things. And those are accounted for, and yeah, they have their place. But great question. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any follow-up.
The only other question I have is, you said it's an OKR, I assume, for this quarter, which started a month ago. Am I right on my quarters here? So we have like 8 weeks to like do this. How much of a time commitment do you need from people on this call and or like engineers? Like if we're planning on like, I don't know what your scope of like audience is, but like how much of a time commitment do you need over the next two months?
Yeah, this is actually a multi-quarter OKR. Because of the scope of it is actually gigantic. For you guys, I'm hoping it won't take more than like an hour of your time total. Does that seem reasonable, Andy? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically
On the orders of hours of under 3 max.
yeah, we're gonna take a stab at, this code reviewer job performer and ask some of you to take a look at it. And like Andre and Matt, I'd love to have you guys in there, and also Matthew, both Matt ends, and Alex and Amy and Kai. And Thomas, if you want to jump in, everyone's welcome. Like the more eyes on it, the better, but it's up to you. And yeah,
Sorry, are we supposed to volunteer, or are you going to reach out to us?
I will. You will be voluntold.
Fine, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Ben, I left a note in there to suggest that you get another tech writer, if at all possible. Trivia point for you. Top 20 contributors of the past year, usually about 5 of them are tech writers. We review a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Cool.
And
yeah,
we are and are not like engineers.
right. But you go through the review process, right? You're using the same mechanics, whether it's for a different purpose, so it's relevant.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good insight.
All right, number 4. Sort of for Andre and Phil, and I'm pushing more than I normally would on sort of getting an update. 1, because it's dragging, and 2, I had a customer call this morning where they were asking about it, and so I just top of mind, and thought it would be good to figure out what we need to do to sort of move forward on the issue, which is like disabling of line wrapping. And for those that don't know, GitLab automatically soft wraps lines inside of the merge request for reasons. Any updates, Andre?
Sure. Yes. Thanks, Kai. It's been dragging on purpose. Essentially, we hit a bottleneck, and we wanted to bring this up with Annabelle, and then this reorg and everything. We kind of like stumbled a little bit to get the feedback out. But this is where we're at. Going back to the conclusion, we're kind of like proposing to put it back in the backlog, because it seems like we need to do a deep rework of the layout of the diffs to be able to accommodate what we're trying to do. Again, this behavior, although we do see that sometimes on code tools. They're usually IDEs, or if they're not actual IDEs, they're similar. So Monaco, for example, does this very easy because they basically have the editor experience built on the web. However, as we're displaying code, and we're displaying code in the way that we've been doing it up until now, that becomes a little bit counter nature to the way that the layout works. So essentially, we want the layout to be fluid. We want to have that division of the codes of the two sections in parallel, but then we want the internal part of it to be free-flowing beyond the size of the parent. We're using CSS Grid for the layout of the diffs, which introduces some restrictions in what we can do and can't do there. Compound the mounting tech debt already up until now with the variations we need to introduce to account for parallel and inline on both cases, where wrapping and non-wrapping. At the moment, it's more than we can handle in terms of implementations. However, in the comment there that I linked there, we also have some worries about experience. Essentially, our file content can be interspaced with match lines, with comments, with a bunch of things, and the files diffs themselves can be pretty tall, which introduces some struggles to try to scroll horizontally within the file diff, which is even more complicated if we take into account the parallel. So there are still a couple of UX questions in our minds. We try to document them in the comment. Recorded a video explaining what me and Phil had been discussing. So for now, it seems like we need a far deeper rework than we anticipated when we first picked up this issue. And this issue was scoped as a smallish enough tweak. And we quickly realized we need far deeper rework. Now, if that's a priority, then we're fine in sketching up a plan to rework the layout. We just don't know how that integrates with, restructuring the MRs or refactors in terms of performance roundtable conversations. So there's a lot of stuff in there that we could probably get some help in understanding. First, are the UX struggles acceptable? Are we okay with that? And then if so, and if we need to prioritize this, then we need to actually come up with a plan to actually rebuild the layout in a way that it accounts for this. Now, adding a Monaco per diff file is out of the question, just from the performance perspective, which is also something we're trying to balance out here. There's a couple of solutions that we could do, like detecting the size of the screen and calculating the layout using JavaScript. There's a bunch of things we can do. We're just very cognizant of the performance limitations we have on the merge request for very large files and for very large MRs. We don't want to screw up even more than we currently have. So that's kind of like binding our hands a little bit. So that's kind of like the TLDR, which isn't very tiny. But does that clarify our stance? Kai?
Yeah, I think to me it does. And I saw that you tagged Alex and Matthew in it. So I'm happy to let them sort of review and get feedback. I think from a product perspective, I agree that like we pursued it thinking it was trivial. If it turns out it's not trivial, then it's probably not worth doing. It's probably also whatever the conclusion ends up being, we should just make that clearer in the issue with sort of like a good comment, and potentially like just close that issue sort of explicitly as something we won't do to make the stance more clear. I think it's not helpful to leave that sort of lingering around as like, we want this without, and then always needing to like point back to that answer of like, we're not going to do this, and here's sort of all the reasons, and we can always revisit it in the future if like allows, but I don't think it's worth from that side. But I'm happy to let the new UX folks dabble their toes in what sounded easy and turns out is not in code review, and get some feedback on it.
Yeah, and I think, Matthew, your feedback would be very useful to draft that note, because usually we have customers asking for this, and some of the times they're like, every other tool does this. I'm like, yeah, VS Code. But if you look at other diff tools, it's not that common to have that flexibility from as far as I can see. But your feedback on those UX limitations will be interesting and important for us to draft up a note of what we want to do with this with the future. In the future.
Cool. Yeah.
Feel free to reach out to me if you need clarification or anything.
Sounds good. I'll take a look at that today.
Cool. Thanks.
I guess it's like how many browser-based IDEs or diffs do this, and that's probably the main challenge.
I know.
Yeah.
Garrett supports it.
Yeah. Do you know if they do like diff one at a time, or like do they have a tabbed interface and stuff? I haven't used Garrett.
Yeah, I don't. I know Garrett does it. It doesn't look like the other one does.
Yeah, no.
They do not. So I think that's pretty normal. And I know like IDEs. I think the challenge for some users, why we looked at it anyways, is the challenge for some users is this: some languages naturally make very long lines, particularly like, I don't want to call them older languages, but like older languages tend to have that sort of structure where they are longer lines, and so that the wrapping becomes more apparent and more, I think, destructive for users in those cases. But yeah, it's certainly a balancing act.
An understandable request, like 100%. We're not saying that it's not reasonable. It's just that, yeah. It's just not straightforward, and it takes a much more investment than we anticipated at this point.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the update. Amy, you've got the last one, and then we'll get out of here.
So 1511 lands on a weekend, and the lottery was going to put that very busy release on a new person. We're not going to do that. So she who took 14.0 and 15.0 will take 1511. Please don't kill me in 1511. That's all I ask. Because it's going to get busy right around the time that you all start sending me stuff. So do let me know what your bride prices are.
Awesome. We will, yeah, Andre and Matt, if you can let the team know on doc stuff as it comes through in 1511.
Yeah, great. It's the last 24 hours are probably going to be bad, but that's how it is when it's on a Saturday.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. It's good to see you all, and we'll chat soon.